if human civilization destroys itself in the next 75 years, it probably most likely will be a World War III type of scenario, maybe a nuclear war. How do we avoid that? We've been talking about Iran, but there'll be new conflicts. There's Ukraine, China,
Kashmir.
Yeah. North Korea.
No, yeah.
Don't forget North Korea.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when North Korea was the biggest threat to human civilization, according to
We could have had a deal, except John Bolton ruined it.
So that's the bigger question, not so much in the specifics.
Oh, I mean the second time. He ruined the Clinton deal of 94. Then he ruined the Trump deal of 2018. Or
Maybe the North Korean dictator ruined it. But again, one doesn't want to blame our enemies for their mistakes.
Well, you know, at the second meeting, Trump sent John Bolton to Outer Mongolia so that he couldn't sit at the table and ruin the deal. But what happened then? The Democrats had his lawyer testify against him while he was at the meeting. And they had this huge propaganda campaign that Kim Jong-un is going to walk all over Trump and take such advantage of him. And they made it virtually impossible for him to walk away claiming a victory.
Scott, do you ever blame the enemy? Ever? Do you ever blame the enemy?
North Korea is not my enemy.
North Korea is not your enemy.
No.
Really? They build nuclear weapons, ICBMs that targeted America.
That's George Bush and John Bolton's fault. I already said that.
Whatever's fault it is, the fact of the matter is, do you ever blame an American adversary? Or is it always our fault?
In fact, what happened
was... Is it always our fault?
See, all you can do is characterize, but you want to talk about the details. The details are that Stephen Biegun, who worked for Donald Trump, gave a speech and said, you know what? We can put normalization first and denuclearization later.
I know him very well.
Then they brought Donald Trump brought John Bolton to the meeting, and he prevented that from being the message of the meeting.
So it's always
ruined the deal.
Always John Bolton's fault.
Yes, that's right. It's all John Bolton's fault. Because how reasonable does it sound to you, Lex? Give up all your nuclear weapons first, then we'll talk about every other issue. Does that sound like a poison pill, or that sounds like a reasonable negotiation? Give me a break.
Sounds like a beginning of a negotiation.
Yeah. Well, they got nowhere.
Well,
because Trump brought John Bolton with him and helped to ruin it.
And maybe they went nowhere because the North Korean dictator, at the end of the day, is a dictator who wants to threaten the United States with ICBMs and nuclear. Listen, you're criticizing the sequential decisions made in a negotiation. I'm just asking you a serious question after hours of talking.
Okay.
Which I must say I've really enjoyed. I've learned a lot.
I enjoyed it.
I think there's been areas of agreement, obviously real disagreement. But here's the question to you. Really, I mean, do you ever hold our adversaries responsible, or do you just don't think we have any adversaries?
This is ridiculous. The topic has been,
tell me,
from your point of view, it's all the adversaries, and all America and Israel are trying to do is survive and fix the situation the best they can.
I think I've acknowledged America is having mistakes
by
the whole
bringing
time.
up all the things that America and Israel have done to make matters worse. I didn't ever say that the Ayatollah is some great guy, or that Kim Jong-un is some hero, or like any kind of thing to spin for their side.
Are they a threat to America?
No, of course not. As Zbigniew Brzezinski said in 1993, we could have perfectly normalized relations then. You talk about Iranian support for Al-Qaeda. Iran supported Al-Qaeda in Bosnia in 1995 as a favor to Bill Clinton because they were trying to suck up to the United States.
Is
why they supported Al-Qaeda.
Your position.
Yes, my position is whatever you say it is, not what I say.
No, I'm just I'm trying to summarize.
You know who's the last person who told me I need to beware about overlearning the lessons of Iraq? It was Charlie Savage from the New York Times, when on the subject was his absolute ridiculous hoax that Russia was paying the Taliban to murder American soldiers in Afghanistan in 2020, which ruined Trump's potential, which he was floating trial balloons about withdrawing in the summer of 2020, which would have absolutely prevented the Joe Biden-era catastrophe.
You said it.
And Charlie Savage, who published these ridiculous lies that were later refuted by the general in charge of the Afghan war, the head of CENTCOM, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the director of Central Intelligence.
As much detail as possible.
He told me, you know what your problem is, Horton, is you have overlearned the lessons of Iraq War II. But it turned out those lessons were perfectly apt for Charlie Savage's hoax. It wasn't true what Charlie Savage said. You know what he resorted to? He said, well, it's true that there was a rumor I was reporting on.
Scott, you made it very clear America has no adversaries.
That's called learning the lessons of Iraq, not overlearning them.
All right. So I guess the answer to the question I asked about avoiding World War III is the two of you becoming friends. That's my goal. If we can try to find the light at the end of the tunnel, one last question. What gives you hope? To the degree you have hope about the future, What gives you hope about this great country of ours?
Well,
and humanity, too.
yeah, I mean, look, there are a million wonderful things about this country, the land, the people, our culture, and our resources and everything. And the kind of society that we could build not with a controlled system, but with just a pure free market capitalist system in this country where people are allowed to own their property, improve its value, and exchange it on the market and build this country up. We would be living in comparatively a paradise compared to what we have now. And if you look at the opportunity costs just since the end of the Cold War on all that has been wasted on militarism in the Middle East especially, but also in Eastern Europe and in East Asia, all of that wealth put here could have gone much more to something like perfecting our society. It's always an unfinished project, so that then we really have something to point to the rest of the world and say, this is how you're supposed to do it, not like that. I think it's crucial that for all of the problems that Somalia, Syria, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan have, the worst thing about those countries is America's wars there. It's what we have done to them as the worst thing about those places. So we're not in much of a position to criticize, whatever horrible and political practices, cultural and things about their societies that we would like to criticize, when the worst chaos that's happened to them has been inflicted by our country against them, virtually all in wars of choice that were unnecessary from the get-go.
What gives you hope?
What gives me hope? I think, first of all, I have a lot of hope and confidence in the wisdom of the American people. I think Americans understand, at the end of the day, that they need leaders who are about making America great again. I think they elected Donald Trump, who is flawed in many, many ways. But I think Trump is wrestling with some of the questions that we have been wrestling with for the past 5 hours. I think that I think most Americans know that we have adversaries. And it's just overwhelming numbers of Americans understand that. They may disagree on exactly who is an adversary and how you rank them, but they know we have adversaries. I think the third thing is Americans greatly admire the men and women in uniform. I mean, I think the institution with the greatest popularity in America still remains the U.S. military, while many of other institutions are failing the American people and are reflected in the polling. I think we've got to be very judicious about how we use this incredibly powerful military. And because most importantly, it comes down to, it's not about weapons and technology, it's about the people. It's about the men and women who have sacrificed their lives to serve our country. At the end of the day, if we understand we have adversaries, we're careful about how we use our military, we understand the importance of forward deterrence in order to actually confront threats before they become so severe that we ended up plunging ourselves in a war. I agree totally with Scott in terms of how we use our money and how judiciously we have to guard it. I agree with how we've run up these massive debts, and we have to be actually, if we're serious and conservatives are really serious, they need to stop. They need to tackle these massive deficits. And it would be really easy if it was just all about the military and we could just kind of get rid of the Pentagon and all of a sudden we'd be running balanced budgets. That's not the case. We have much deeper structural economic problems in this country, and everybody knows that. And so we got huge challenges as a country. But I really believe, as I believe since I was a little kid, that America is the greatest force for good in the world, and that we make mistakes, sometimes tragic mistakes. We make huge miscalculations. And I think we will be much more clear in how to rectify those mistakes if we stop obsessing with these boogeymen that are out there, the Israelis, the Jews, the influencers.
The Iranians.
Well, and we start focusing on our adversaries, which are not the Iranians, because the 80% of Iranians despise this regime. And Lex, I feel really bad that in 5 hours, we actually haven't even talked about that in any detail.
Many of my friends are Iranian. They're beautiful people. And it's one of the great cultures on earth. Yeah.
And the only place they don't succeed in the world is inside the Islamic Republic. When they come to America and Canada and Europe, they're incredibly successful people. And 80% of Iranians despise this regime, and they long for a free and prosperous Iran. And so it's a big question that they're ever going to get there, and who knows the right way to get them there. But at the end of the day, I am convinced that the vast majority of Iranians are our friends, but there is a regime that has been trying to build nuclear weapons. has been engaged in terrorism for decades, has killed and maimed thousands of Americans and our allies. And it's a regime that has to be stopped. And I think Donald Trump, in the past couple of weeks, I would argue in the past number of months, has tried to play a strategy, try to figure out a way to offer the Iranians negotiations and a peaceful solution to this, but use overwhelming military power recently against Iran's nuclear sites in a very targeted way in order to send a message to the Islamic Republic of Iran that they cannot continue to build nuclear weapons and threaten America. And so I hope that things will work out well on this. I've always said curb your enthusiasm, because we have still a lot of pieces that still need to fall into place. And this is going to be a windy road as we try to figure this out. I'm hoping for the best, preparing for the worst, and want to thank you very much for having me on the show. Scott, it was a real pleasure to meet you. I enjoyed the debate, very lively. I admire your dedication to the issue and your attention to detail. And I think all of that speaks well of you and your commitment and your passion for this. So thank you.
Deeply grateful that you guys will come here. This is really mind-blowing. Also, that you have, it's silly maybe to say, but the courage to sit down and talk through this, through the tension. I've learned a lot. I think a lot of people are going to learn a lot. I'm a fan of both of your work. And it means a lot that you come here today and talk to a silly kid like me. So, Scott, thank you so much, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Lex. Appreciate it.
Bam.
Thanks, Scott.